Welcome back, guys, to the Beyond Condition podcast, the voice of bodybuilding. And today I have an international guest, Nicole Lareau, who has joined me from. Where are you from, actually? I haven't
Yeah.
told
I actually just moved to Michigan.
you.
So I'm in sort of mid Michigan, the Flint metro area. I live in, yeah, that area. I don't live in Flint, Michigan, but in kind of that area. I'm originally from just south of Boston, Massachusetts, though. So
And what's the weather like there at the moment? I have to ask because it's super cold in the UK.
it's been pretty warm here, which is weird because I live right on a lake, and normally the snow is like by this time, like it's already kind of bad, I guess, but it is 55 degrees Fahrenheit. I don't know what that is in Celsius. It's cold for me. Previously I was living in Tennessee, so I was used to super warm weather. But for the season, this is actually pretty warm. I've been told.
You're like, it's still cold for me.
Yeah, no.
So, I mean, there's a big story behind what I've seen, of course, on your social media. So I've only seen really snippets, and particularly the video that you sort of said, "Hi guys, I'm going to come off social media for a bit," but in summary, what had been going on and how long that prep had been, and then actually, essentially, stepping away to then be able to progress as a person, as an athlete, and be able to address the things that you've been going through. So. Where would you say the best place to start with would be to sort of, go from there?
Yeah. So I guess we should probably start at what my plan for this year was.
Yeah.
Which we so I went pro in December at Nationals of 2022. Right after that, I had some upheaval in my life, and I ended up having to move back down to Tennessee. I was in Massachusetts, my hometown at the time. I ended up having to move down to Tennessee. There was a housing issue. I was in Airbnbs. I was just kind of bopping around. It was craziness. um,
Yeah.
and I moved down to Tennessee sort of on a whim. But then by March, I had gotten my own apartment. I was, things were good. I was getting into the groove. I was back in the gym. Things were really great. And I had a great and very productive off season. And I will say we planned a very long prep, a very long prep, which was probably our first mistake. But the reason we did so was because I do have a lot of health issues, chronic health conditions. Rheumatoid arthritis is the one that affects me the most. Yeah, with bodybuilding. So honestly, in prep, I don't do a lot of cardio. Sometimes I don't do any at all. So the thought was we would do a bit of a longer prep to make sure that I would be where I needed to be, especially because this was going to be my first IFBB show. So for we have to be very, 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 very lean. So that's where we came from in choosing. We started prep on October 30th of this year, and the plan was to do the Optimum Classic in down in Louisiana on May 25th, I believe, is was the date that it was.
So it's quite long, isn't it, compared to sometimes, I mean, you hear of sort of 12, 16 week preps, don't you? So,
Yeah, so it was previously my first prep I did I believe it was 20 weeks,
yeah.
maybe 22 weeks, and then it was another 10 weeks to nationals. So I was also fine with it. I was comfortable with it. That's just kind of how we've all and going into nationals, I had stopped cardio, got like a month out, 6 weeks. I wasn't doing cardio. So I was very comfortable with that situation. We knew how my body was working. By that point, I had been with my coach long enough. He really knows my body. So yeah, I was cool with it, but it was already going to be a very long year.
Yeah.
um, and then my new health issues, I should say, they started in February. Um, February of this past year. I've said it a couple times. I don't really remember it. It was to the point that like I could barely get out of bed. My boyfriend was like literally helping me out of bed. And it was just, yeah, I don't have a lot of memory of it. I know that sounds very scary, but ultimately, I started working with my rheumatologist. We thought that there was rhabdo going on. Um, we thought that maybe there was myocarditis going on. So in December, right after Christmas, a couple of days after Christmas, I did get COVID. And it was pretty bad. I am immunosuppressed because of, my rheumatoid arthritis and other autoimmune issues. So it hit me pretty hard, but I got better, moved on. Um, but yeah, something happened in February. We still to this day don't really know what, but at that point, they were looking at doing a muscle biopsy. Perhaps they thought I had another autoimmune condition. There were just a lot of things going on. And the main issue and why I felt the way that I did was that my CK levels were in like the 1800s, I believe. So the muscle waste was just like through the roof and you would have no idea. Like
Yeah.
I was lean. I looked like I looked really good. People thought I was getting ready because I remember I did a couple of events in February, and they were like, "Oh, like when are you getting on stage?" Thinking it was like a couple weeks out, and I wasn't getting on stage until May. So
Mm.
it was very. I'm thankful. My body is very very resilient. I will say that. Um, but yeah, it was just. And at that point, when this all happened, we were very happy that we had more time because at that point, not only was I not certainly not doing any cardio, I had stopped doing cardio completely by February. But not only that, I could barely train. Like I barely trained all of February, and then by the time I got back into training, we weren't really training legs. Then we did go. We went. My entire career, I've worked out 5 days a week. We went down to 4 days, barely touching legs, no compound movements, nothing like that. So it looked quite a bit different. Um, and then, so I'm sorry, this is like such
Oh
a
no,
long story. Okay, okay. I just
no.
wanted to make sure. I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, for sure. This is why, of course, seeing the real and what you put across there, or the video, should I say, it's that snapshot, isn't it? And you rarely get that chance to actually fully express, actually what's gone on. And for the listeners as well, when people do face things, it's often you get one thing and it does lead to things. So this is super insightful.
Okay, good. Thank you. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't like, talking anyone's ear off. But yes, so then at the beginning of May, we were 4 weeks out. I had been having some digestive issues. My stomach was bothering me a lot. I was having a lot of stomach pain. And the only thing that sort of helped make it feel better was training abs. Like I train abs every day, especially in prep. And I would do most of it at the gym, but then when I got home, I would just do like my basic crunches. And doing that is the only thing, like bearing down is what made it like feel better.
Oh, okay.
But it would go away. It was coming and going. It wasn't like anything, you know. It was bad. It got bad, but then it would go away. And so I was like, okay, whatever. One Friday night, 4 weeks out, I I don't really I was in bed. I think I was asleep, if not almost asleep. And I was home alone. My boyfriend was out, and I just had the most debilitating stomach pain that I've ever had. And it was, I noticed or I realized very quickly that something was very seriously wrong. I was sweating really bad. And when I say like I do have a high pain tolerance, I really do, I swear, but it was it was unlike anything I've ever experienced. Truly. I have broken bones, I've done, no. And I knew that I needed help. I started getting really confused. I started feeling like I was passing out. Like it was really, really bad. So, long story short, ambulance ended up coming, went to the hospital. While I was in the ambulance, my heart rate was down to 32.
Wow.
And yeah, so they were snowing me with pain medicine. They thought that my appendix had burst, but they couldn't figure out why my heart rate was so low. Like there was just and I was confused. So then they were trying to like, it just, there was like a lot going on. So we got to the hospital. there was more, they basically gave me pain meds until I passed out because, at that point my boyfriend was there. And yeah, it was just, the pain was, it was crazy. So did all the tests, everything, no, everything's fine. I did tell them that, there was suspected myocarditis already. So they did look at my heart, they looked at my stomach. So what ended up happening was I had an NG tube placed that night. I stayed overnight at the hospital. They diagnosed me with something called SMA syndrome,
Okay.
which is where basically what ended up happening, and the reason I was in so much pain is that your aortic arteries and mesenteric arteries get squeezed. So that was reducing blood flow and it was causing a lot of pain. And that's the other thing, because like I was having like chest pain and like in my sternum. So that they were checking for like heart attacks, like everything.
Yeah, yeah.
But basically what it is, it's very often diagnosed in adolescent girls with anorexia because it's a space issue. So I was so lean, and it's also just the way my body's built. And I will say this: if you're in prep, so I was eating shredded lettuce, like with my, that's a very common thing. No, that definitely caused some of my problems as well. So I don't do that anymore, and I would highly recommend anyone who's in prep, it's not worth it. I know it feels good at the time, but and this is obviously a very extreme case and
Yeah,
extreme
yeah.
thing that happened to me, but it can definitely lead to some digestive issues. But either way, they did the NG tube. They ended up letting me go the next morning after just like removing, causing, creating some space, doing whatever. At that point, I knew that I needed to get in to see a cardiologist because the heart rate was super concerning. My rheumatologist, her husband happens to be a cardiologist. So I was able to get in with them very quickly. And the other thing I do want to say, obviously, bodybuilding gear is a thing. And I want to make this very clear. I tell, especially with all the existing health issues that I have, I'm always 100% open and honest with my doctors, and especially like the ambulance people, like all the paramedics and everything, because especially at that time, I had no idea what was going on. So I was just telling them everything. And what I want everyone to know is that I've done this for years and I've told them for years everything that I'm always on. I've moved across the country several times. There are things in place like HIPAA. I'm not sure how it is in the UK or otherwise, but I always think that it is better just be honest, tell them, because you never know what could be going on, like anything, anything of that nature. And I know that that can be scary, but it's worth it. Your health is worth it. So he did have, my cardiologist did have some concerns, especially about I do take GH,
Okay.
and he was a little concerned about that. However, I will say, I've always taken very low doses, and there was no enlarging of my heart or anything of that nature. But at the time, he was a little concerned, so I just wanted to take that opportunity to mention that you should always tell your, just in case, just always tell your
Yeah, yeah.
doctors.
For sure, for sure.
Yeah, but either way, so he scheduled a cardiac MRI, but they were booked out very far. So in the meantime, he knew when my show date was. So I was, like I said, like at this point, I think I was like 3 weeks out. And so he decided that he was going to do some initial blood work. He was going to get me on a heart monitor. And as long as those things looked okay, he would let me do the show. So, and at this point, I will also say, like, my rheumatologist had, basically said, yep, I defer to the cardiologist, as did my regular doctor. And my coach, said I defer to the doctor as well, obviously. So it was kind of all riding on this. So 3 weeks out, I had a heart monitor, which I kind of like stopped posting because I didn't really want anyone to know, because that it looks really scary, and I didn't want anyone to think that I was, putting. And I there's always risk.
Of
There
course.
is absolutely, yeah. um, but I was on the heart monitor for 2 weeks. I had it taken off on Monday. I sent that back to the company, and I had gotten my blood work, I think a couple of days before then. And my initial blood work that he wanted to look at, which are some markers, some cardiology markers. I'm not exactly sure which ones. I could go back and look if anyone needs to know, but they were fine.
Okay.
So he said, you can do the show. So we were stoked.
Feel like
And
it's very close now.
yeah, like it was like we were like, oh my gosh, like this is awesome. This is so great. And this was Monday and we were leaving on Wednesday. So that was another thing. Yeah, that was another thing is we were like, okay. And we had waited, gosh, we didn't register for this show. I would have to go back and look, but it was like a week and a half before, maybe 2 weeks. Like it was like we really pushed it just to make sure because I had so much going on. Um, so basically we left on Wednesday for the show. Again, we were in Tennessee and we were driving down to Louisiana. I believe it's like an 8 hour drive, something like that. And in Arkansas, about halfway, I had a seizure in the car. And my boyfriend is, or previously he was a medic in the army. He's retired now, but I was not driving, he was driving, and he got us where we needed to go immediately, which I'm very thankful for. I'm also very thankful. We were in the middle of nowhere, but there was a hospital by some chance. Like there was a hospital like 6 minutes away. We were in the middle of nowhere. So
That's when
that's
you know
another thing.
the universe is looking after you.
Absolutely, absolutely. Like that was because there's no reason there should have been a hospital that close at all. But he called 911, got me there. And it was there that we found out I had pneumonia, which was not on anybody's radar at that point. Like that had never been mentioned. I had no idea. I was like, pneumonia? Like, what the heck are you talking about? And it was funny. Um, I knew that I couldn't do this show. I had just had a seizure. I was very confused because so I've had one other seizure in my life. I was a bit younger. I think I was 19 years old. And I'm 30 now, so it was quite a while ago. But after talking to the doctor and they obviously immediately ruled out stroke and heart attack again because those were the two main concerns, especially because I was confused and they looked at my brain. We did the CT, everything, and after talking to him and reviewing all the results, the doctor at the hospital said that he felt like it was just my body's stress response. Not to say that it's so casual, but it's not necessarily like epilepsy or anything of that nature, but it does seem that when my body's under a lot of stress, that's how it reacts. And obviously, that was rough, but I'm very thankful that that happened because I never would have stopped otherwise. And again, I knew that I couldn't do the show, but when he came in and told me I had pneumonia, I looked over at my boyfriend. I even texted my coach, who was planning on meeting us there. So he wasn't with us, but he was planning on traveling there. Um, and I was like, well, it's only pneumonia, so can I still do the show? um, and I remember before my coach even answered, Nelson is his name, Nelson Jones. Before he even answered, I sent another text that said, I know, but I need you to say it because I can't do it.
Mm.
Um, but I would have kept going. I always would have kept going. um, but I have really good people in my life and a phenomenal coach. He was like, "Abs, no, what do you stop?" Like, heck no. And he reached out to the IFBB. He did and thank you to the IFBB. They didn't fine me or anything like that. Obviously, I had a legitimate reason. They just like void the contract basically. But thankful that that's how that ended up. Um, and then yeah, after that, there was just a lot of doctor appointments. There was a lot of stuff going on. I had already been in prep so long that I really just didn't want to give up. So I did go back to the hospital again for more seizure activity. I was having the same like aura situation. I had really bad migraines and headaches after that for quite a while. Multiple brain scans. I had the cardiac MRI. Just everything that could get done got done. And my CK levels when I was in the hospital in Arkansas were like 1400, I think. So when we heard that, we were like, oh, that's great. The doctor was like, what are you talking about? But we obviously knew that they had been higher.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah, yeah.
things were like, look, things
Look,
started to get better
mhm.
and they were looking good. And I talked to every doctor like almost every day, and I had like every test imaginable. And we had decided we were going to do another show. I wasn't really going to be ready for that because we weren't pushing very hard because obviously my body was in a very fragile state. We ended up regroup, so the whole point of trying to do these shows and try to get the shows in, we did, want to see if we could qualify for the Olympia. But just things were it wasn't going to work out. So we decided to regroup, and we were going to do a show at the end of September to hopefully qualify for next year's Olympia, which I was okay with that. I had a lot going on in my life, a lot of really positive things. I was really busy, and I still, I obviously my body was really tired. I was really tired. So, that was the plan. And then in August, mid-August, I started to feel a little funny again. I basically was just pretty out of breath, and I started feeling the way that I used to feel. And I called my mom, and she said I had to go to the doctor. And we were all so casual about it. Like my mom, my boyfriend, my no one thought that I had pneumonia. They were all like, get checked, let's make sure, but I think you're fine. And I knew, I knew in my heart, I knew, but I convinced I told myself, I was like, no, it's fine, it's fine. But when she told me, I knew, I already knew that I still had pneumonia. It was in the same spot. It was just as bad. It was a little worse actually. And yeah, right then and there, I knew that we had to pack it in for the year because there was no way. There was just no way. And to this day, at least as of a couple weeks ago, I still have pneumonia. I have a doctor's appointment on Tuesday to find out what's going on. But at this point in my life, like it's crazy, but I'm dependent on, I use inhalers all the time. Do think that I still have it and we're gonna need to do something else. I'm not sure. We've tried a couple of different antibiotics. I was on antibiotics for 6 weeks after I last got diagnosed. And then I had gone back a couple weeks ago for a repeat x-ray, and I still had it. So they did an injection at that point. And then I had also done IV antibiotics back in May. So we've tried a couple of different things. I can't say for 100% certain today that I still have it. I'll know on Tuesday, but you know, I've had pneumonia now for what is suspected since January, after I had COVID. So that's like what we think is going, and that's what we think has led to all of this. Sorry, excuse me. Based on what I have felt the past year and what I feel right now, I'm pretty confident in saying that I still have pneumonia. But we'll find out. So that's my spiel. That's what happened to me this year. And that's why I wasn't able to compete this year. So
I mean,
yeah.
it's that story in itself, and then straight away I'm sort of thinking, when we relate, we often consider post show as a very difficult time for competitors, don't we? And it's often related to that high of the show. You've prepped for it, you've competed, you've experienced that adrenaline, and the next day you wake up and it's like, okay, what do I do now? Unless of course you're doing multiple shows, etc. But for you it's like that there's been that never ending goal almost, isn't it? And then it's then like, okay, so now this is me, and I will not be competing potentially till, the foreseeable. How does that feel mentally for you? Have you been able to sort of process it, or are you still in that spot?
So the first time, so back in May, when it happened, when it truly happened, and I had the seizure, and it was a couple days before the show, and I couldn't do it, I was, I mean, inconsolable. It actually makes me emotional thinking about how upset I was at the time. I thought I was so embarrassed. That's what it was, which is so silly. I felt like I let everybody down. I didn't even like the word bodybuilding would like send me to another planet. Like I couldn't handle it. I couldn't talk to anyone, and it sucks because I had a really great gym community and a really great relationship with a lot of people that at the gym. That's like, I work from home, so the gym is my life. And I'm a bodybuilder. Obviously, that's like what it is anyway. I spend the most time there other than home. I met my boyfriend at the gym, like, you know, like that's like we, and I couldn't even like look anyone in the eye. And I couldn't talk, you know, obviously everyone was like, what the heck? You know, no one had any idea. They knew I was getting ready for the show. So everyone wanted to know how the show, you know, and it just, and I did not handle it well. I was crying all the time. I was, I just thought my life was just over. And honestly, what pulled me out of it was continuing prep because I was like, okay, that's it. I can still do this, like whatever. And that was at the time when this came back around in August. I handled it a lot better. Like I said, I knew that I had something going on. I knew that I couldn't really breathe. I knew that I didn't feel right. So I expected it. And that's not to say that it was or is easy. It is not. It is not at all. I think the biggest thing for me is that I feel like imposter syndrome because even, yes, I'm an IFBB pro. I've only done two bodybuilding shows in my life. So it almost feels like I'm fake or not, you know, but I've trained and I've lived you know, for 11 years at this point. So I know that. And if anyone else were to say that to me, I'd be like, you're silly. Like that's not, and not to mention bodybuilding in and of itself, that's not where my worth is anyway. And I know that logically. But emotionally, it's especially because, you know, because I was prepping for so long. And even before prep last year, I was pretty lean going into prep. Um, I didn't have my period for I think like a year and a half. Like I didn't have my period since May 2023, I think. And I did finally get it back here just a couple months ago. So that has been huge because my estrogen was tanked for well over a year. So, and I was on a bunch of antibiotics also. And I started using a steroid inhaler. I refused to do like the prednisone steroid pack because I was like, there is just too much already going on mentally. Like, I will go absolutely crazy. So that's which, if you have pneumonia, take the steroid pack because I wish that I did. Because maybe I wouldn't still have it now, but we'll see. But yeah, I'm a lot better now. A lot better now. I think that a large part of it was just that I was feeling crappy for so long, and I am starting to feel better. Like I said, I do still think that there's something going on. We'll find out. But I think that the biggest thing for me is knowing that my coach is my best friend, Nelson's my best friend, my boyfriend's my best friend, my mother's my best friend, and they they love me no matter what, and I know that. And if it weren't for them, like I said, I would have kept going. If I had a crappy coach or, you know, crappy people in my life, I would have kept going and who knows what would have happened. Um, but they've definitely helped me realize that, yeah, my worth is not wrapped up into any of that at all. And it also is not a testament to how hard I mean, I worked my tail off. I continue to this day, you know, it's different in every phase. Um, so yeah, I'm a lot better now. I'm not perfect. And by perfect I mean I'm not, you know, 100% like cool with it. And I don't think I'll ever be cool with it. I think until I get to compete, I'll have a little bit of a chip on my shoulder.
Okay.
But I'm at peace with it, and I don't know the reason why I wasn't able to compete this year. I was so sure that that was my path this year. Starting from December of 2023, I was so sure.
Mm.
I knew at that point what show I was doing. I thought I had the year all figured out, and obviously that's not what happened. I also, for the record, would have had no idea that I was going to move to Michigan. So, but you know, I don't know why yet, but there was a reason, and that's just sort of what I hold on to. You know, I everybody has their own beliefs about, you know, sort of the universe or, you know, who's in charge, the creator, like whatever. The only thing I know is that somewhere, somehow, out there somewhere, there was a reason why I wasn't going to compete this year, and I was never going to compete this year. And that's just is what it is. I was the last one to know, but but that's okay. So I just hold on to that, and I know that whatever is next will be for me. We can only do what is for us, and I do believe that that is already decided long before we even think of it. So
Mm.
yeah.
I think as well, even through everything you've said, even through all of those challenges and it being multiple things, you're in love with the process and the journey of what bodybuilding can bring. And I think that actually sometimes we can sort of see it on social media as the highlight reel, and you know, we're led to believe many different things about bodybuilding over the years and what that looks like as a competitor, but that sometimes detracts away from, are you doing it because you love it, every day you're thinking, I want to progress, I want to excel. And sometimes when it gets taken away from you, actually it gives you that perspective to go, this is me, I'm more than bodybuilding. However, I do this because I fucking love it and it's my
Yes.
choice. And you get almost that, and that's what I've found with challenges, it's that silver lining of like, this is what I really want to do, rather than like all of this happened to you and you find yourself not wanting to do it again. It's actually you're more motivated than ever when the time is right.
Absolutely. I couldn't have put it like any better myself. That is, and honestly, I don't even know if I've expressed it to myself or my friends and family in that way, but that is exactly what it is. Because if you're doing this for anybody else or for any other reason, and I don't say that, we all like outside validation. We all like, come on, like
We
we
did,
love,
yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
like it is what it is. I'm sorry to say, but it is what it is. However, if you are doing it solely for those reasons, it's never going to work. You're not, there's going to be cheating on your diet, whatever it may be, because you need to. I say that I'm crazy. I think that I think that bodybuilding is a very good outlet. And if I wasn't doing that, who knows what I would be doing? Because clearly there's something a little off in my head. Like that,
You're not
there has
alone.
to be, right? Like there has to be.
Yeah.
Um, so if you're doing it for any other reason, if I was doing it for any other reason, I absolutely not. I never. Are you kidding me? I would have stopped when they shoved an NG tube in my nose down to my, like, absolutely not. There's no way I would have kept going. But you're right. It's just I have worth outside of bodybuilding, but bodybuilding is what I love to do. And that's why I'm going to keep doing it, and that's why I'm continuing to do it now. And like I said, I definitely have a chip on my shoulder, not towards anyone or any situation in general, but I just know that, especially with how much progress I've made now, like looking back at my last off season to now, and looking what we were able to look like this past year, I know that I still have it in me. I still have the fire. I don't know how I am 30. I don't know for how many years I'm going to do it, but I'm definitely not done. I'm certainly not done. And everything now, I have to get healthy in order to continue. So yeah, things look a little different, things feel a lot different. Um, what I'm doing may not like look like the way I used to bodybuild or the way you or someone else bodybuilds, whatever, but that's what I'm doing right now is getting healthy. And that is very difficult for me because that means I have my period, my estrogen's high, I'm not on anything at all right now. And gear wise is what I mean. And I haven't been, since August. Obviously we stopped everything, and it's different. It's not my favorite look, for example. It's not the best I've ever felt, but it's very important, especially as a female, um, and especially as a chronically ill individual. Unfortunately, there's a time and place for everything, and right now this is what it is, and that's okay because it's all for a higher and greater purpose. So.
Yeah, it is. It's so true. And the thing is, until we come across these quite big challenges, right? It's not a little thing. But even when you get an injury, and most of us are going to have come across something, you can really go into this dark hole of like, why has this happened? what, what is this leading to, and what you've described, and then we often see, okay, so maybe it was for that reason. Would you say during this time of sort of still processing and everything that's happening at the moment, are you seeing things over the last year that you've learned and things that have helped you grow as a person as well at this point?
Oh my gosh, absolutely.
I love taking
Like,
that.
so, oh my gosh, no, like, so first of all, for like the physicality, for example, Nelson and I have learned so much about my body, and like the biggest thing is for me to trust myself, because I do know when things are off. And my biggest issue when this all started was that I was in prep and I was dieting I was really, really lean for a very long time. I didn't know, or I thought I didn't know what was what, what is just prep and dieting and oh, that sucks and suck it up, and what is no, there's seriously something going on. um and my biggest thing has been to trust myself and to know that I do know my body better than anybody. I'm the only one that's feeling what I'm feeling. And that's why, like I said, in August, it would have been so, because no one thought that I had it. No one, it wasn't a thought in anyone's head. It would have been way easier for me to not say anything at all. I was,
Oh, yeah.
I guess, like 6 weeks out at that point. I could have made it. I could have made it. And I know that. But I made the choice where I said, no, I have to say something. A couple of months ago, before May, I wouldn't have done that. I absolutely wouldn't have done that. And I know that about myself. And it's unfortunate that it took something as scary as it did, but I did at one point, especially after I had the seizure, and when we were already home and when I had to go back to the hospital. I was very scared. I was scared I was dying. I was 100% scared that I was dying. I was convinced I was dying. And I looked at my boyfriend and I said, I'm done. I'm done. Like, I won't do this to us anymore. Like, I'm done. And he, knowing me, I had like altered mental status, like from the pneumonia and from everything going on. And so I'm glad that he knows me enough, but he looked at me and he said, okay, we'll talk about that after. Like, well, because he knew like I wasn't done, but I was scared. And I will never forget how scared I felt, and I'll never forget what his face looked like when I woke up after having the seizure, things of that nature. I'll never forget either of those things. And that's why I spoke up in August. And even he was like, okay, we'll see, but obviously, so that's the first thing, is just like I learned my body really well and I knew when to trust myself. So that was the first thing, like physically. And then otherwise, like I said, I don't know why yet. But I do firmly believe that, yeah, there's a reason. And I think the biggest thing for me is just knowing that. And it has allowed me to take a step back. And I also I also, learned, and I've already apologized, but I will again publicly. I didn't handle it great with, right out the bat. Um, and I don't love, some of the way that I left some of my relationships in Tennessee. And we moved up here with, literally, it was like a 2 week thing, so that was not planned, anything like that. We just really had to get up here for work. But I definitely learned some things about myself and learned, it's okay to be embarrassed or to be emotional or to just have no idea what's going on. But the number one thing is that it's not like the world isn't against you. It's you didn't do something to cause this, unless you did. First of all, just for crazy things that happen, I'm definitely I like I would be friends with me, I think.
I love that.
So
I
like,
see this. I'm like, I think I'm quite cool.
yeah, right. I'm like, I think so. And I haven't always been like that. That's the other thing, is I can look back when I was younger. I was like, oh, she was not very nice. But the way I carry myself now, the way I know that I treat everybody, um, there was nothing I did at any point in my, even before, when I wasn't a great person when I was younger, there's nothing that I did to cause any of this. And it's no one's out to get me, nobody's out to get me. Like it's not, that's not what it is. And for a little while there, it's embarrassing to say, I don't like that I felt like this, but there were a couple of times that I was like, oh, why me? Why me?
Yeah,
Who
yeah.
knows? We will know, but who knows? But it's not. It's just a thing that happened, and who knows? Maybe I'm supposed to talk about it and make sure that other people don't ignore their health issues or what's going. You know what I mean? So, who knows? But that was really the biggest thing, was just knowing that sometimes life just lifes, and as long as you keep the right people in your life and are nice to everyone who deserves it, things are going to happen the way they're going to happen, and it doesn't matter what happens to you. It just matters how you handle it. So
Yeah, it is. And it is when you do have acute challenges. So when, the first time this happened in the first show that you didn't do, that can be when you are getting externally validated on this journey. It can almost like everyone, when it's acute, it's like you'll get messages and things like this. And then that can die off. But for yourself and many people that will be listening that have had, surgery or broken a bone or any of these things, medical conditions, when that dies off, who's there, right? And who is
exactly.
there? And that's what we often learn. And what people also don't realize is something of the nature of what you've been through, at December, January, February coming up, you're still going to have those times where actually you could do with someone going, actually, I'm going to check in with Nicole. How is she? But people don't, they forget. And then you get this opportunity to realize, actually, this is my circle, right? And you've said three people there that you're best friends. And I'm sure you'd agree that even if it was just them three on Earth and you would probably be okay.
I would be happy. My dogs. I would like to bring my dogs too, but other than that,
Yeah, it is.
yeah,
You truly realize, and I don't think that's necessarily, a negative against people as well, because everyone has their own stuff going on also. But it's just that main, I guess, that external validation, it doesn't last enough, and it also doesn't last enough when you do, a whole prep and you do the show and everyone's behind you. It's that post-show period as well, and similar to where you're at now, where there's not a show right there, it's like people are on to the next thing, aren't they? And that's human nature, right?
yeah, yeah. It's not a negative, to anyone, especially in this day and age where the way to make money through bodybuilding, if that's your main bag and your job, it's Instagram, right? Or it's TikTok, social media in general, right? So I think that what happens is we have a lot of pros, for example, who only post when they're lean. They don't really post like what they actually look like currently. And obviously, who likes to post their deep into off-season
It's
photos? No,
hard.
I don't.
It's
Like, are you kidding me? So I get it.
hard.
Um, but we do have this situation where what a lot of people are seeing is just the lean, the extremes, and that's all they're seeing on their page. So that's what they're drawn to. So then when someone else, is taking an actual off season and not posting, they're like losing followers and they're losing engagement. And I've seen that happen multiple times. And I used to be like, what the heck? This is so embarrassing. Like, why do people hate me all of a sudden? But it's just because, like you said, it's not as exciting, it's not as sexy, it's not as cool,
Yeah.
and that's just human nature. And I understand why people that really make their money through, I get why they don't post that stuff. And it's economics. Like, I get it. Like, I'm not gonna get mad at anyone. Like, get your bag. Like, that's totally fine. But for the people that are not like the very upper echelon, like top three at the Olympia, just remember, um this is what my, like, your life here, your actual physical life is what matters. And yeah, you have to make sure you have the right people around you, and you have to treat them just as well as you want to be treated. So don't get so wrapped up in making sure the lighting is perfect for your set at the gym. If you're asking your friend to record you, like, just enjoy the workout with your friend. That's sort of what, and it's hard. And I'm the first one to say it. We all love external validation. It is human nature, like you said, but other things, matter more, like your real life. So
Yeah, you do. You get, I think, as well, because you do become quite compromised in a prep, right? Like we've sort of touched on it a bit with the brain function, etc. So you then get these like dopamine hits from you post when you're shredded and everyone's liking it and it's in the interaction and stuff. But again, it's then quite hard when you don't get those hits off the back of it. And also, it's going to depend on how you place and how the show goes and how the prep's been, etc. But it's this searching for, and then it's almost like, how do we fulfill ourselves in normal life as the humans we are, outside of, the Instagram and the social media, etc. Would you say as well for yourself with the adaptations with training that you've had to do and not being at the gym as much, has that been hard, or have you found when you're, not feeling so good, have you just felt that that's okay more so because you wouldn't want to train when you feel ill, if you know what I mean?
No, it has been, you would think, and I think that that's human nature to not want to. No,
Get me to
training, no, like training to some capacity has been in my life for 11 years. And I say this all the time. This is going to sound really bad. I, I don't even necessarily like love training or lifting weights. It's just what I do. It is part of my life. It's non-negotiable. I'm going to the gym. And I don't say that because like I don't care about anything else or I'm just going to the gym. It is what it is. I went to the gym this year on Christmas because I was in prep and of course I tried to move it around and change it so it didn't interact with, I saw my family and that was what was important on that day, but I was in prep and I had to go to the gym. I went to the gym. And it's my routine. I'm very, very structured. I have a to-do list. I have several to-do lists. Like it drove me absolutely crazy. I didn't like, yes, I felt sick, but I didn't feel like me not going to the gym. So I guess it's kind of, I do love training, obviously, but I just mean like people like love getting a pump and like what that feels like. It hurts. I'm like, I don't like, you know, but obviously I do love training. Obviously I do love training, but I just, the way that some people talk about it, I'm just like, yeah, it's cool. But,
Yeah, I see what you.
um, no, it drove me absolutely crazy. I just convinced Nelson a couple of weeks ago to give me my fifth day back, but I can still only train legs once a week. I did finally get him to okay one compound movement with like one or two top sets for legs. And then I started to try to bench heavy again because I don't know, it's just part of it's just me. And he was like, okay, well, there's no reason to be doing singles, triples, double. Like we're bodybuilding, we're not powerlifting. Remember, because I used to powerlift.
She's gone powerlifting mode.
Yes, like I just want to like feel heavyweight, but no. It was horrible. That was very difficult for me mentally, not training, and still to this day, like I'm not training to the capacity that I'm used to. But to be honest, like most of it is limited by my actual body. So mentally, I may want to do more, but I physically can't. And it is getting better every day, and I am getting a little stronger. And like I said, I was able to go back up to 5 days, but that fifth day is just sort of a cleanup, like upper body, 45 minutes. Like it's nothing crazy. Um, but yeah, no. And the other thing I want to say though is don't be like me when you're sick. You probably shouldn't be training. It obviously it depends what kind of sickness we're talking about, what kind of severity we're talking about. But generally speaking, I have to pull myself back. I have to be pulled back. I do train with my boyfriend who can make sure that I am, not being crazy. But generally speaking, yeah, it was incredibly difficult for me. But I did what needed to be done at the time. And now, even though I'm pushing back a little bit on Nelson, I'm still doing, what needs to be done in order to heal. So
I love that you've got that respect for your coach to just be like, look, you tell me what to do. But then also you've explored the close relationship you have. It's like you're saying, I think we could probably do a little bit here, and then he has a look, and then you go back and forth. And I personally feel like that's where coaching relationships excel, where it's, you're a team, aren't you? You're like a little squad against the world, and it's you've got these dreams, and if you can find that coaching relationship, you're exploring things together, and as you've stated, you know your body best, but then if you're able to talk about that he learns your body more, and then you continue to excel as a coaching pair. And I feel like as well, if you're the client, you're more brought into that, right? Because it's like, actually, I'm part of this, and you're learning as well.
Yeah. It's the biggest thing is being honest with each other, like both of you. And as long as you're honest, it turns into that, right? Because he trusts me to know when, hey, maybe we could add a fifth day in. And it was me who suggested just a cleanup upper. The first year that I was with him, he did my training since December of 2022. I've done my own training.
Nice.
And what he did, like what he'll do is look at me and, for my check-ins and I tell him everything. I'm always honest about everything. And he knows that too. So he knows I'm not going to be lying about anything. Um, Plus all the good coaches, I'm sure you know if someone's lying. You can see it. Like you right? Like you can tell. So I wouldn't try to lie anyway, but don't
That's
lie to
what
your
you want, though.
coach.
You want to try and have that relationship where the client doesn't want to lie. Because
Exactly. I'd be too afraid to lie to Nelson. Like I wouldn't do that.
I
um
lied.
Yeah, but like, so he's able to look at me and say, okay, yeah, because I do my own training, but he's like, hey, can you add a back movement on this day? Can you do this on this day? Things of that nature. And yeah, to your point, as long as you build that trust, especially initially, and give your coach enough time to learn your body before like jumping into a prep, for example, um, that's where it really excels. And yeah, now everything that I do, like I don't feel like I'm only in this for myself. Like it's us. Like you said, like it's like you against the world. Like that's how it should be. That's what it is. Um and I do like I think about that like again, like my boyfriend, he is part of that too. And so that was why when I was deciding like what shows to do, I always ran everything by the three of them. Again, my mother in there too. Yeah, right.
I love
But
that.
ultimately that's sort of, a little off on a tangent, but ultimately, yeah, the as long as you're honest with your coach and you have a good coach, that's the other thing is like pay attention. Communication on both sides is incredibly necessary. Um, and anything you have questions about, especially gear, and make sure you're asking the questions one, and then make sure you're getting answers too. But as long as you're both doing all of that, and as long as you're both invested, and being invested means telling the truth, and it means doing what you're told, because that's what you're paying them for, period.
Mhm.
And as long as you're doing that, you will excel and you will go very, very far. I see a lot of people coach hopping and I'm not saying that necessarily as a negative because there are situations in which you need to leave a coach. I completely understand. But as someone who has had the same coach since I started bodybuilding, it has been, I mean, it has paid dividends because now, yeah, he can look at me, say, okay, eat this, and he knows what it'll do to my body. Um, and I know that I can go to him with anything, and it's not gonna be a big deal. He'll just say, okay, this is what we're gonna do. So
Yeah,
yeah,
it
very
is.
important.
It's getting that chance, isn't it? And if you find it, it's a magical thing.
Yeah,
I often reference, when you step on stage as well, you're stepping on stage for you and your people, and that's a proud moment, regardless of the placing and whatever accolade. It's like there's just something so special about that, and I feel like that married into the purpose of bodybuilding. So as we spoke about earlier, enjoying the journey, the purpose, whatever phase you're in, combined with a good coach. I mean, it's literally a dream come true, and it's something
absolutely.
I wish I could gift to everybody because it really does excel what bodybuilding can bring. Now, before we have our listener question, you mentioned earlier about GI. Now, that's something that I'm sure we could probably talk about that for another hour. But with GI in itself, and I know you mentioned about some disruption, and when you were doing the abdominal exercises, that's all that helped it subside. Have you had still issues with GI as you've moved away from the prep, or have you had any more exploration there?
So first of all, yes, I've still had a little bit of disruption, but nothing to the point that nothing the way that it was, nothing the way that it was. I do think that moving forward in preps, we do have to keep in mind that I do have this SMA syndrome, especially when I'm super lean.
Mhm.
So that will be something to be explored. I will say that, again, I knew that I was going to be moving before the end of the year. I didn't know when. But I do have a doctor's appointment next week, and I have to get a couple of referrals there. I am choosing to ask for a GI referral to go see a GI doc to just make sure everything is, because that's not something that I had ever heard about or ever really like had a major issue with. Um, but the biggest thing I will say is that I have always had really bad acid reflux. So it's a little different, but like I've always had really bad GERD ever since I was a child. And I didn't know this, but if you have acid reflux like that, that can actually, the acid can lead to recurrent pneumonia. So I didn't know about, so we also have that in play. Yeah, had no idea. So, um, but yeah, I'm a lot better now. I do, I take a lot of glutamine. I take a lot of glutamine. I take like magnesium, things of that nature. Like everything is a lot better, generally speaking, in my off season anyway. But like I said, because that happened, and because I did continue to struggle a little bit with pain after that. Again, only when I was in prep, but I still want to know that everything's okay because obviously and I have a tendency to have autoimmune issues, so there could be something like that going on. Who knows? But again, in order to start a prep again, I know I need to have all my ducks in a row, all everything all set. So I am gonna go and explore that a little bit more. But generally speaking, things are fine now. But that doesn't mean something didn't happen, and there was not necessarily a good resolution to that other than gaining some weight, which that's great. That's great, but it's not necessarily an answer. And I will be lean again, so I'm gonna want to know. So we'll
It's
see.
it's very hard with, the nature of a prep, the extreme nature of it. I think that it's probably talked about more so, in recent years, as it were, but like this whole process and then what can come off the back of it, and it might not necessarily be in the prep, or it can be after, and with the GI health, like it's literally, that's why I say we could talk about it for another hour, because it's like this open,
There's so yeah.
there's so much that goes into it, and whether that's, the basics of food selection or managing stress or sleep or what gear you use or whatever these things are, and then for yourself having medication and antibiotics, like, there's so much, isn't there? And it's actually quite hard sometimes to narrow that down, but I certainly feel like having the investigations is a good idea. If you can do that before you go into a prep, if it's a reoccurring problem, it's a good move.
Yeah, and like you said, there's so much. There's so much that could be wrong. That sounds
Yeah.
kind of scary to say, but there is. Like, who knows? I certainly don't know. And just because it is such a I mean, it's just kind of a hallmark of bodybuilding, which is unfortunate, but that's sort of the nature of the beast, right? The things that we do are extreme, and there are going to be some issues, and as long as you mitigate them to the best of your ability, which in my opinion is seeing doctors and making sure that you know what you're doing. Um, because I don't know, I can do all the research I want, but it's still there's going to be 18 different sources that say 19 different things somehow, so the best thing that you can do is find, in my opinion, a good someone that you trust. Doesn't necessarily need to be a classic MD. I know that there's many different, holistic medical, that's I'm not, saying for sure it has to be an MD or anything like that, but as long as there's someone that's knowledgeable and can tell you what's going on, um, definitely ask the questions. And if you feel like something might be off, don't ignore it. Do not ignore it. Like I said, obviously, looking back, if I really thought about it, I'm way too tough for my own good. But if I had truly listened to my body earlier, things may have been different. And who knows, maybe things could have changed. So and it's not fair to play the what if game, and it's not necessary. But if there's something that you can get ahead of and get in front of, and that means listening to yourself and not ignoring sort of any weird signs and symptoms, things that you may be like, oh, that's whatever. Don't
Right.
do that. Yeah, yeah, don't do that. You never know. You never know. So
It's like with anything as well, isn't it? It's sometimes it's almost that elimination of certain things if there's whatever that problem is, not just GI, but certain things that can occur. It's like, do we need to eliminate something? Do we need to change something? Try that for a couple of weeks. Okay, then
mhm.
that is still there. Do we and sometimes this can be again like the bodybuilding journey, right? Certain training methods work for certain people. certain routines work for certain people. And then over time, you start to realize, again, working with a coach for a long period of time helps that because even though the coach might not be a specialist in certain things, they can still learn with you as well and learn your body. So, yeah, I feel like there's been some really good messages for the listeners today of certain things that you can gain from bodybuilding, but also essentially being able to push through those challenges and as the title of the episode, knowing when to take a step back because we are all, like you said, a bit neurotic. So it's not
Yes,
always easy to you because the thing is, right, you could survive it. I'm sure you could, like you said, you could still step on the stage, but would you be your best physique? Would you enjoy
exactly.
it? And what happens after? So that there is so much. Now, the listener question is
Yes.
from one of my athletes who's actually staying for the weekend, Kimmy. She actually listens to the podcast, and that's how we first actually connected.
Oh,
And
that's awesome.
yeah, it's super cool. And she's come over for some time here, but we're gonna do a live
Hey.
listener question
Hi.
for the first time on the Beyond Condition podcast in nearly 3 years.
Oh my
So,
God.
Kimmy, welcome to the
Thank
podcast.
you.
What would you like to ask Nicole today?
I've got two questions for you. Hope you don't mind.
No, that's fine.
One of them is, do you feel there's enough emphasis on health and well-being within competitive bodybuilding?
No. Definitely no, I really don't. I think that it's easy to sort of tell, your followers or whatever, get your blood work, do that. We see that a lot. Get your blood work, get your blood work. But I don't think that there's definitely not enough talk, especially amongst female athletes, female bodybuilders, about gear usage. And I understand why. I think that it's first of all, there's legality issues. But more than anything, I think it's just really taboo. And I don't think that it's talked about enough. I think that, which I get it, it's uncomfortable. These conversations are uncomfortable to have. I understand. Um, but if you're going to do it, and you're gonna, especially if you're gonna like coach or you need to talk about it more in my opinion. I also think that there's not, like I said, and I mentioned this, I don't think that there's enough of an emphasis on, you can tell people to go to a doctor, but are you telling people go to a doctor and tell them everything you're doing and be honest about it? um and that's the other thing I do want to say is like, it's not necessarily fair, it's not anybody's responsibility to take care of anybody else or to use their platform to do X, Y, or Z. That's not fair to say, and that's not what I'm saying. But I do think among especially athletes that are also coaching, I think that it needs to be talked about more. And sorry, there's a train that goes. I don't know if you can hear that, but there's a train that goes right here. If you heard that, I'm so sorry. There's a train. um, but this has come up several times, at least on podcasts that I've listened to in the past couple of years about bodybuilding. I don't really know what it would look like, but I do think that the IFBB and the NPC should at least provide more, or sorry, the major bodybuilding federations. That's obviously, but I think that I don't necessarily know how it would work. And it's so many people have talked about what they need to do, but I do think that there at least needs to be an emphasis on it. Maybe not necessarily requiring blood work or what, there's been several things that have been talked about, but I just think that education is probably a little more necessary. And the only organization that I could say that it would come down from are the bodybuilding organizations themselves. Because, like I said, I don't necessarily think it's fair for me to say, if you're going to have a platform, you need to use it for X, Y. I personally wish you would, but I can't require that or hold it against you for doing that. So sorry, that was long. But to answer your question, no, I don't think that there's enough emphasis on it at all. So
What do you think from your point of view with the emphasis on health? Because this is your second season, isn't it? As a
Yeah, it's my second season and I've done 3 shows.
so still,
okay,
And I've had different preps
yeah.
with multiple coaches.
Mm, mm.
There's so many things that I didn't know to look out for, right? Like, because if you haven't experienced something in a prep, how would you know to listen to whatever your body is telling you if you don't know, again, what's prep related and what isn't? And
Yeah.
again, I'm not saying anyone
How would they
has to.
blend? Yeah.
Yeah,
How would
exactly. Like
they
you
yeah.
yeah, like if you don't know what you don't know.
Mm.
So I wish people would talk about it more just so they know what to look out for. But again, I don't want to say anyone has to do it because that's not fair. But I would urge and encourage people to talk about it more because you don't know what you don't know. And if you don't hear it from anyone, like I always, what I try to post and what I try to talk about and say are the things that I wished I had at whatever certain time in my life. So that's who I try to be. Is whoever I needed, you know, 3 years ago, 2 years ago, whatever it is, last month. That's what I try to do personally. But
What's your second question? It's like your homework,
You
wasn't
could ask your question all day.
it?
What advice would you give to other athletes about balancing health and competition? This is a good one.
Yeah.
it's a really good one. I think that it kind of goes into what we talked about at the very beginning in terms of external validation. So if you're doing it for I don't want to say the wrong reasons, but if you're not bodybuilding because it is just in your heart, it's in your blood, it's what you absolutely love, it's not worth the risk. In my opinion, that's my opinion. To be honest with you, whenever people talk to me about bodybuilding, I more often than not sort of steer them away from it. There are a lot of health risks, even if you're, doing it completely naturally. Like it doesn't matter, like being that lean, you're starving yourself for a long period. That's what you're doing. You're getting to dangerous levels of body fat, and that has a lot of negative side effects. And so I think that the number one thing is to just be incredibly honest about yourself in the first place about what you're willing to do before you ever start bodybuilding. As soon as it's a thought in your head, I think you need to know for a fact, and it's individual, it's different for everybody, but you need to know what you're willing to do and what you're not willing to do, what you're willing to give up, what you're not willing to give up. And I think that that could inform your decisions about bodybuilding in general, but it could also inform your decisions about, for example, for me, I have a lot of health issues. So we sacrifice time. I spend a lot more time in prep versus out of prep because we know I can't be doing hours of cardio.
Mm.
So that's something that I accept on the front end is, hey, I'm going to be in prep for 30 weeks, 26 week, whatever it is. It's a long time. And I don't have cheat meals. This prep was the first time I got a burger ever. Other than that, it was I was oh my gosh, I had a couple of burgers before it was all said and done, and I was like, what? Because I never got that. It was just like, okay, have 30 extra grams of rice. Um, so that's that's how we balance it is I have to be incredibly strict with my diet. I don't really get a lot of refeeds. I don't necessarily get fun things like burgers or things like that, but we do it because we know if we do it any other way, my body will give up and suffer. And not only will that mean that it doesn't look as great, but I could be doing some long-term damage, especially to my joints. And that just is what it is. So again, sorry, that was a super long answer, but yeah, I would just be very clear and honest with yourself and your coach about what you're willing to do and what you're not willing to do. And then from there, always remember too is that the stage is always there. And it's also not it's not the end of the world. And if we're talking about taking, years off your life, personally, I don't feel that that's worth it. Some people it may be worth it. I don't know, and I'm not here to judge or comment on that, but just be very aware that this is a very serious undertaking and it's no joke. And just make sure you're doing it for the right reasons, and just know that everything in life has risks, and there are some you're willing to take and some you're not willing to take. So don't accidentally take a risk because you don't even know you're doing it because you're not super well informed with what's going on. So
I love that. Actually, Kimmy's been sharing a bit more on your social media, haven't you, about
Yeah.
sort of and again, like you say, everyone and does it to their different version of what bodybuilding is, because there is so many different versions. But if you are doing it to the IFBB level, if you're pursuing, the pro card, etc., it's not pretty a lot of the time, and it's not what you see on Instagram, and that's why I think it's important if you are pursuing it to and all three of us on our social media are actually sharing, this has got to be because you want it so fucking bad.
More than life.
Yeah,
Yes,
it is your
literally.
everything, and
Eat, breathe, and sleep bodybuilding.
yeah,
Nothing else matters.
yeah, it's
And unless if that's not the case, I know I love it. I love it. If that's not the case, yeah, it's not for everyone, and that's okay.
Oh,
You
and
know?
you know that after one show, when you do
Yeah,
your first show, that's when you like figure out, is it for you or not?
yeah.
It makes sense.
To this, my mother, again, my mom, she didn't. She still doesn't really understand it. Of course, it's very difficult to understand, but she saw me on stage. She was at my first show. She saw me on stage, and I didn't know this was going to happen either because I had never done it. But as soon as I was not nervous at all, at all. I felt so at home. I felt so good, and she could tell from my face that this is it for me, right? And unless if you don't have that feeling, if you're not like, oh my gosh, I'm comfortable, I'm at home, this is it, I can't wait to do the next one. Um, it's not worth it. That is how I feel, and that says nothing about you as a person at all. Again, like I've said, your worth is not wrapped up into bodybuilding. And so if you don't want to do it or you do a show and don't like, that's also completely fine. It doesn't say anything about you as a person. The way you carry yourself and what you do and say, that's what matters as a person. So I'm not trying to sit here and say like you're not cut out for bodybuilding. That's not what I'm trying to say at all. It's just if it's not for you, it's not for you, and that's okay. It's not worth putting your body through the things that, yeah, it's prep is not fun. But listen, it's not fun. It's not fun. So, and it doesn't, like you said, it's not sexy. It doesn't look good. It doesn't, it doesn't feel good. Um, right? Like when the soles of your feet hurt and then you get backstage and it just smells like like
oh, really?
Protan and body odor. Like it's not if you don't love it, you don't need to be there. And that's okay. That's okay.
It's important though as well because, like you said, you've listened to some podcasts and stuff over your time, and I think sometimes a discussion like this, if someone's listening, they're like, I just don't know if it is the right thing. It's like you say, it's never saying that we're better than anyone or anything like that. It's like what you are doing, it is impacting long-term longevity of your life. It could be, things off the back of preps health wise. And it's important to actually know that, if it isn't the right path for you, that there are other things, or there's bodybuilding as a lifestyle, right? Like you can look really fucking good. You don't
Absolutely.
step on stage and join the crazy club.
Yeah.
It's finding the
Yeah.
version that works for you, of course. Now, thank you for coming on today. It's been very, very cool to meet you properly. Obviously, e-meet. If anyone wanted to reach out on Instagram over message or anything, is that okay with you if anyone listens and they resonate?
Yeah, I was gonna say when you were just talking about knowing if it's for you or not, I was gonna say like a big part of it for me is talking through it, and thankfully I have people in my life that I can do that with. But if you don't have that and you're not sure or you want someone's perspective who has done it, like things of that nature, yes, absolutely, my DMs are always open. So I don't sometimes it takes me a couple of days to get there. um it depends on, like it's my busy season at work, for example, so it might take me a couple of days, but I will get there. And yes, you can message me about anything. If you have any questions or you need advice or you just need someone to talk to. Like I said, it's very important to me. There have been times where I have felt like I have no one and nothing. Thankfully, I'm not there anymore. But if anyone ever feels like that, you can absolutely reach out to me because I know what that feels like, and I know I'm just like a random person on the internet, especially in Michigan in the United States, but if you feel like you have absolutely no one, that's never true because I'm here. So
Well, it's
yes, you
interesting,
can.
with the sort of medical conditions and things that you've faced and are still facing now, there could be someone that listens because it's global, you see. So someone could listen and go, "Oh, okay, I've got this, or I suspect I've got this, or something like that." And like you say, it's like a almost a lifeline, isn't it? To know there's a human there that could maybe advise a little bit, or even point in the right direction.
Yeah, I was gonna say I may not have all the answers, but I'm usually pretty good. This is why I'm good at my job. I may not know everything, but I can find who does. So
Yeah, I love that. Well, thank you, Nicole. And of course, I will speak to you soon.
thank you guys so much. Have a really good night.
Thank
You
you.
too. Bye.
Bye.